what was your early life like? And how did you get on? How did you get interested in computers?
Wow. Well, going way back for me, the initial introduction was when I was in elementary school in the States. That's grades 1 through 6, approximately 6 years old to 12. And I don't remember what grade I was in. I think it was around third grade, maybe. So I was maybe around 9 years old. And the school got a field trip to a computer center. I think it was University of Miami, since I was living in North Miami Beach at the time. And I remember us going down there on the trip, and this was back in the days of mainframes. This would be in the early 60s. And there was a visitor area where you could walk through, and there was a big glass wall, and on the other side you could see the computer center. And this is the mainframes with the tapes spinning, and people going around in white coats and taking tapes down, and main console, and a lot of blinking lights and everything. And it was quite interesting. And I remember as a kid, I was saying, I want to go inside there. And they said, oh no, sorry, you can't go in there. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, I can. I'm going in there one day. So that was sort of my earliest introduction. My next vivid memory would be when I was 12, 13. We went to New York World's Fair. This was in Flushing Meadow. It was quite an event, ran for a couple of years. I actually went back and saw a special on it and watched a lot of the videos from it and going, oh yeah, I remember that. But for me, the real key was the IBM Pavilion. It started off, it was like a giant ball where the bottom dropped out, and it was seating. And you went up into the seating, and then they lifted you up, and they gave quite a presentation, lots of screens, and I can't remember a thing about what they presented or what they said. What I do remember is that when it ended, they exited us through to a basement area, and I don't remember if they lowered it and there was a place you went through or there was a separate shaft. Don't remember that at all. But down there was exhibits that were hands-on. And one corner was the one that I made a beeline for. There was a bit of a line there, and it was the computer playing a game. Each person was allowed to come up and play a game with the computer, and the game being played was tic-tac-toe, X's and O's, the traditional 9 square where you had to get 3 of your own in a row. And I finally got up there, and it's finally my turn, and there's buttons that let you press which of the 9 you wanted to have for your turn. And up on the wall was 2 big signs that would light up. One of them says computer 1 or I 1 or something to that effect. And next to it was tie game. And I remember talking to him and saying, where's the I 1 button? The computer loses. He said, the computer never loses. I went, whoa, that's amazing. So I played my game with it. Don't remember if I won, lost. I know I didn't win. Don't remember if I lost or tied, but that stuck with me. And then later, segueing a little further into the future, I'm now in high school, and I was in my senior year. And as an experiment for the state of Florida, they decided to put a computer terminal in the high school math resource center. There was a computer terminal to the University of Miami. It was a Selectric typewriter that had the ball was replaced, and it had a lot of Greek letters on it, because what it was hooked up to was APL. That's A Programming Language is the name of it. And this particular version was APL 360. It was running on a mainframe there, so we just had an access. There was a dial-up modem. You had to call in with a rotary dial, call in, and then put the handset into an audio modem, and then and it would finally connect, and then you could type. So there was no screen, but there was a keyboard, because it was a typewriter, and everything you typed went right onto the paper, and you can have the paper when you're done. And I remember going in and saying, wow, that's cool. What is it? It's a computer. And they said, great. I said, what do I have to do to use this? Anybody can use it. Just there's a sign-up sheet next to it, and just do it. And I said, well, how do you use it? And they said, we have no idea. You figure it out. I ended up spending my own money and buying from the University of Miami the manual for APL 360. And I think for me, at the time, it was an outrageous amount of money. It was $10. But to me, it was well worth it. Best $10 I ever spent. And I studied the language and started learning it. I wrote a couple of simple programs. APL is a very interesting language. It's a mathematician's language. Right. For example, you can take the determinant of a matrix with one operator, which would be a large subroutine in any other language. Bunch of Greek symbols. The flow is very esoteric. It's just a very strange language. I don't recommend it to anyone unless they're planning to do mathematical programming. But this is what I had, and this is what I learned on. So after I did a few fun little programs like, hello, what's your name? And it would type it back. I decided I wanted to write a game. And the game I wanted to write was Tic-Tac-Toe, because I remembered that from IBM. And I remembered that the computer could never lose. I thought, I want to write a program that does that. And so that's what I worked on. And I don't remember how long it took. It probably was a month or so. I got permission from the school, from the high school, that I could come in early in the morning when the janitors got there. They would let me in. I would go up. I'd use the computer before classes. We were on what was called a mod system at the time, which you had classes and breaks. So anytime there was a break, I would be at the computer terminal. And then I got permission to be locked in at night and stay as late as I want and let myself out and lock up the school. Wow. And so I would stay late at night also programming and working on this. And I had a blast. I finally got my program working where you could play against the computer and it would never lose. And I was so proud of it. That was my first game. I contacted the University of Miami because they had something called a public area where they would put programs that others had written into that public area so others could see it and use it. And I asked, can I put this game in there? It works. It plays tic-tac-toe. They came back to me with, oh no, sorry. We've already got one, and it's far better than what you had. My 15-page effort, excuse me, of writing this tic-tac-toe program, somebody had done in a page and a half. And I went in and poured over their code to see what they had done. And I learned all sorts of programming tricks, how to reuse things, how to rotate matrices. It was just amazing. It just opened my eyes. It's when I realized programming is not a science, it's an art form. And there are lots of different ways to do things and lots of tips and skills that can be picked up. So that was what got me interested into computers and games on computers. One note was originally I had early admission to go into pre-med in University of Miami and skip my senior year in high school. My mom had worked it out so that I'd gotten accepted and I was all set to go. This was before I even knew about the computer, but I actually went to her and said, I really don't feel like I'm ready to go to college yet. I want to go to my senior year of high school. And we had quite the discussion for quite a while about that. And my mom is, or she was, a very forceful individual. And for some reason, this time I actually won this argument. I was able to go into my senior year. And I know if I hadn't had done that, I'm sorry, just 1 second. Okay. Okay, somebody came in the room. If I hadn't have done that, my life would have been totally different. I'd probably be a doctor at this point, because that was my life's plan that had been laid out for me. Instead, I went into computers and programming. So that's where it went.
And how did you first become aware of adventure games? Because it was the Colossal Caves, wasn't it, that you first saw?
Yes. I was working at Stromberg Carlson. They were a telephone company firm in Lake Mary, Florida. The reason I was working there was they were designing one of the world's first digital central offices. Up to this time, telephones had always been mechanically switched.
Mm.
And if you'd ever seen those incredible devices, it was amazing how they actually worked.
Mm.
But digital was taking over, computer was taking over. So I was a part of a large team of programmers. We had access to a mainframe computer via terminals at our desk, and that's what we were doing the work on. It had been divided up. I was a low-level programmer there. I was assigned certain tasks, and I was working on it. Somebody mentioned that the IT department had gotten this game, Colossal Caves, and I got to watch someone play it over their shoulder, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. That looks like so much fun. And so contact the IT department, got a login, was allowed to use it. And like my days in high school, I started coming in early before work and play the game and stay a little later after work and play the game. Took me a week, and I finished the game, got a perfect score, and I think that was either 300 or 350. I think that version of the game had a bonus round where you could do some extra points at the very end. I had a blast with it. At this juncture in my life, I had my first appliance computer. Okay, that wasn't my first personal computer. It was my first appliance computer. Up to that point, all the computers I had either designed and built myself, or my brothers had built one, or I had built from a kit. There's quite a few steps in there. Matter of fact, I probably wrote one of the world's first 16-bit computer games.
Oh, wow.
There's a sidebar on my personal website about that. My brother designed a bit slice computer, and to get it working, to use it for something, I wrote a game for it. One of my other brothers, we were all in college at the same time, sharing a house. My other brother designed a TV typewriter interface for it. And so the back forward, after that, my next computer was a Sphere, which has some interesting stories, and I also wrote games on that, and I won the world's first "What do you use your Sphere computer for?" contest with a game I wrote for them. Also invented a graphics board for it, because it was only a text-based computer at the time, and I wanted to do a graphics game. So I literally invented the graphics game, gave that to them, and then wrote the game. It was a two-player game, that one. It was Tank War, and I designed and made my own controllers for it with two handles that you'd both forward for forward, turn one back, the other forward, and you'd go right or left, or both backwards, you'd reverse. So you had little tanks on the screen that would go around on 2D World. Two players playing against each other, and you had a fire button, so you were shooting at each other. That was Tank War. So that was my that was quite a nice little machine. But now, moving forward, I finally got my first appliance computer, and that was a TRS-80. And it was a Model 1, but back then it wasn't called a Model 1 because there was only one model, the TRS-80. Though it did have two different versions of the same one. One was called Level 1 and Level 2. Right. Level 1 was a 4K machine with tiny BASIC, and Level 2 was a 16K machine with an extended BASIC by a company I had heard about, and I heard about their BASIC. I'd been using Tiny BASIC already. I had it on the Sphere, which was a nice little BASIC, but it had no floating point, and it wasn't. It didn't have the full range of things that BASIC was supposed to have from as it was designed. So with the TRS-80, one of the things that interested me was it had a full BASIC implementation And it was written by a company that I had heard about, and I heard their BASIC was pretty good, and I was really excited because it was built into the ROM. It was a little tiny company out in Washington called Microsoft. So it had Microsoft BASIC in it.
Right.
And I thought that was fantastic. So I bought the machine, and one of the things about BASIC, this BASIC implementation and the other BASIC didn't have, was strings. And a string in programming terms basically means you're able to manipulate English words and letters.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be cool to write some sort of game that used strings, because up to this time all my games were more video or action or whatever. And I thought that would be kind of cool to write some sort of text game. So after playing Colossal Caves, I had my idea of the game I wanted to write for my TRS-80. I was going to do something like Colossal Caves on it. And I remember telling my friends at work what I was doing, and they laughed, and they said, well, that's impossible. This game is very large. It's running on a mainframe. You've got a little toy computer. There's absolutely no way you could get that program to fit on your computer. And I said, oh, I'm not even interested in looking at the program or what they did. I just want to write something like it. And to do that, I had to literally invent my own language to write the game in, a compiler to break it down into just numeric chunks, an interpreter that would read it and then perform the work. All this, each part was written in BASIC, separate programs. And I literally invented the language, invented the game, and invented all the tools simultaneously as I wrote Adventureland. And so I just started with basic premise. You're in a forest. I thought, okay, what next? Well, what do you see? Okay, trees. And then I started taking it from there and adding features to the language as it grew.
How did you go about designing the rest of the game? Did you have any puzzles in mind when you started?
I didn't. It was an organic flow. Totally organic. I just put myself in the situation and thought, what would I do next? Okay, let's do something then. Well, what happens? Well, okay, this is what happens. So I was telling a story.
Right. And how did that grow into Adventure International? When did you decide to try to commercialize your games?
I had been trying to commercialize before that. I actually had written a very poor game called Dog Race, where you bet on pixels running across the TRS-80 screen and trying to determine who would win. Wrote the program. I even sold it to copies to a local Radio Shack, who put them on the shelf and sold 1 or 2 copies. So I had already been doing that sort of thing. At this time, there was a magazine out. I think it was Soft Side, if I remember correctly. And it was a small publication. It had a very small format, literally about yay big, a micro digest, multiple pages. And it had some ads in it, and then it had in the back classified ads. And so I just put a classified ad in there about Adventureland. Not too big, just enough to explain it, a price, and started selling copies through the mail. I also showed it at a local computer club that I was a part of in Orlando. It was popular there, so I sold copies to people there. So this was the beginning of Adventure International, and I decided to call it Adventure International, being grandiose, like, okay, maybe this will grow. Who knows?
How did you expand into other countries after that? Because it grew quite quickly, didn't it?
It was popular. That was for sure. I got my first wholesale order that came in, and that made me aware of the potential of actually selling this to other companies for retail. Learned about how to do retail, had to learn about packaging, had a lot of hurdles to overcome. So it then became a point where it was doing very well in the States, and I got approached by a fellow who had his own company in the UK, and he wanted to license the game and sell it in UK and through Europe. And so that was the beginning of the actual international phase of Adventure International. He even started a company there with a license right of Adventure International UK. And it grew very well. It was very well received, and I went over and visited with him. Visited with a programmer he had, Brian Horowitz, and Brian was the one who did the conversions to all the other systems. So when I would write a new game, he could take my database and put it in to the interpreter system that he wrote to do my proprietary system, and we had multiple games that way, and so it took off. Besides the UK, also had a publisher in Japan on NEC computer lines, which and they did it. They actually translated it to Japanese, which was kind of fascinating.
So your adventure designs later, did they become more structured?
The designs didn't become more structured. I would just try different things. Every time I wrote a new adventure, I wanted to do something different than the time before. The first one, Adventureland, was very similar to Colossal Caves. A random find all the treasures, and get a perfect score. The next game was kind of similar, Pirate's Adventure, where you had to find treasures, except there were really only 2 treasures at that point. And it wasn't as much find the treasures as much as it was a story that you were going through, and you had a more linear path through of where you were going and how to get there. And then the next game in the series, which I called Mission Impossible, which caused me no end of grief later, it became Secret Mission after let's see, Paramount at the time? No, Paramount was Star Trek. I also ran into problems with Star Trek game too. But in any case, Secret Mission was unique in that it was the first game I totally wrote from the beginning. It was just mission oriented, where you had a goal to accomplish. So like I said, each game I always tried to do something I hadn't done before and mix things up. And I jumped around in different genres and different things that I just enjoyed.
How did the QuestProbe games come about? The links with Marvel?
That was kind of amazing. Marvel actually contacted us. By this time, we were doing well. We were well known in the industry. We literally were AI UK. I mean AI UK. We were AI International because we did have following. The vice president of Marvel, Joe Calamari, contacted us and had me fly up and spend some time with them. Basically, he was very interested in licensing their properties into other media. They had been doing toys for quite some time. They had done a action video game for a cartridge machine, and now they wanted to get into home computers. And he said they asked around, and everybody they talked to said that they should contact me, which was, oh, wow, okay. Marvel's contacting me. We worked out a license where I had full rights to their entire universe of characters. I had full editorial rights. I could do anything I wanted with it. I had the license to do up to 12 games over a number of years. They reserved the right to edit and make sure anything done was to their approval. But whatever I wanted to do, I could do. At this time, I said, well, I want to get more information because I've got lots and lots of ideas. I came up with the name QuestProbe. I came up with the series. Excuse me 1 second. Appear to be fighting off a cold. I put the chief examiner in there. I asked them, is there any, what do their writers use? Is there any basic Bible type thing that they have? They said something interesting that they were about to come out with, and it wasn't quite done, called the Marvel Universe, that had a page for every character they had ever done and a bio. I said, well, can I get a copy of that? They said, well, we haven't published it yet. It's still in rough draft, but we'll give that to you. So I had the rough draft of Marvel Universe, and I read it cover to cover. I also got permission from them to get a subscription to every book that they were publishing to be mailed to me.
Cool.
They came out. And I always had a stack of comics next to me as I was working on Marvel, and I would take them down and read them. I literally was reading them through entirely because I wanted to immerse myself in Marvel. I wanted to get things right. The first game I did was the Hulk. And I remember they asked me, what do you want to do for your first character? And I said, I want to do the Hulk. And they said, okay, he's a good character. He's well-liked, but, you know, he isn't our strongest. Our strongest is probably Spider-Man. Don't you want to start with that? I said, no, actually, I don't, because I'm not going to get Hulk 100% right. I know that. I'm also in the middle of designing a new adventure engine that allows full sentences and other things. I'd rather do Hulk and learn from my mistakes than do Spider-Man. And they said, okay, well, we can live with that. So I did Hulk. It was okay. It's not one of my favorites of my games. And then I did Spider-Man after that in the new engine, and I was a lot happier with it, with what I had learned from the Hulk. It even had some small animation scenes in there, which I was able to put in the static engine. But this was quite a learning curve with Marvel. It was so wonderful to work with them. They had some incredibly talented people. I think I worked with John Romita Sr., if I remember correctly, on the Hulk, even though that wasn't his main book that he was known for, but he did the inking on there. They gave me good talent. I think Al Milgrom from Spider-Man helped me when I was doing the Spider-Man one, though I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while. One of the things I came up with, it was the chief antagonist in the game. Each game, the protagonist was our Marvel hero, but there was always a running thread on an antagonist and a storyline that I was telling that was going to spread over 12 issues. And the main antagonist, I'm not calling him the villain because you really don't know who he is or what's going on at this point, was called the Chief Examiner. And when they were doing the Chief Examiner, it was probably John Romita. I wanted to know how do you want him to look? What are you shooting for? Basically, I did all the outlines of the comics. I wrote the outlines out, then their writers and artists put them together. So I was just the main idea guy for building what was going on. So for the Chief Examiner, I said, well, could he look like me? and got back an answer from Marvel saying, well, send us a picture. So I sent a picture in and got back this comment from them saying, yeah, that'll work. You look evil enough. Oh, great.
Well, I remember watching playing the Gremlins game as well. Was that fun to make?
I had nothing to do with Gremlins.
Oh, okay.
But that was from the same company that I was working with AI UK. So it gives you an idea of their level of competence. They were quite good.
Yeah, because that had a lot of animations as well, didn't it? That was quite fun to play. So later on, Brian started to release games under the Digital Fantasia company name. Were you aware of it at the time? Was he given permission to do that?
Not really. I think at the time he started doing that was at the time my company was folding, because we hit a very tough patch and did not survive. We did not have any investors. We did not have deep pockets. We were totally self-funded from the get-go. And because of it, we did not survive an industry downturn. This was the time when the Texas Instrument computers that were selling for $1,000 were suddenly selling for $50. So it was quite a shock. We also had some major funding tied up with TI. We also had made a mistake by allowing Commodore to take over the Marvel license, Commodore Computer. They were really adamant about doing that, and so we got a three-way contract going between Marvel, myself, and Commodore, Jack Tramiel. And basically, they flubbed it up royally. They killed the line. They really did. Their packaging was horrible. Their promotion was almost non-existent. There was a buyout. There was a penalty clause in the contract that Marvel negotiated with them and got a final settlement and got payout for, but it wasn't enough to keep us going. Literally, it was $1 million settlement, but the way it was split up, the funds wasn't enough to keep AI going. So I think Brian's company came after that. I'm not sure how he was doing the games. I really haven't talked to him since. What I did when I went over there was I explained my entire proprietary system to him, showed him how the whole thing worked, gave him the code for the current, for what I was doing. From what I have read, I believe he may have had his own system that he was able to change over to be able to use the same inputs that my system did, the compiled databases. But I honestly don't know. But he was very capable. He was a good programmer, and from what I understand, he put out some good games also.
Yeah. Sorry, someone's ringing my doorbell. I'll just ignore it. So after Adventure International, what did you do after that?
I basically returned to just mundane corporate programming. I went to work in Florida for a while at a company that was doing consulting to the insurance industry, writing software. And then after that, I moved to Wisconsin and worked for a firm there because it turned out that was an amazing story. The company I'd been working for in Florida was failing. I was no longer working there. And so I was looking for another position, and I kept sending out resumes. And because of my previous roles with, let me think how this went. I want to get the order right. I was getting back a lot of overqualified responses. They were looking for entry-level people. And lots and lots of resumes going out and lots of turn down. My wife and I decided to take this to God in prayer, and we literally had a very deep, long prayer, and right after we got up off our knees, the phone rang. It was like, whoa, okay. Went over to answer it and said, "Is this Scott Adams?" I said, "Yes." Who's this? This is John Matthias. Remember me? Oh, well, hi, John. John was the head of the software department at Commodore back when I had done all my work with them. He was the one who saw the vision of the games. He was a great support. We got we had a lot of good memories and a lot of good interactions. I said, "Yep. Well, haven't heard from you in a long time." This was after Commodore had gone out of business. Didn't know what he was doing, where he was. And he said he had started he said he'd been looking for me for the last 6 weeks and trying to find me, and finally was able to run me down through a common contact. And so he called. He had started a software consulting firm in Wisconsin. I was wondering if I'd be interested in working with him. I said, "Sure. Wow. Yes, I certainly would." where's Wisconsin? I lived in Florida all my life. Honestly, Wisconsin was somewhere up there. I don't know where it was. My wife, he flew my wife and I out, and basically ended up getting a position with him very early on in the company. I think he had a total of 8 or 10 employees at that point. And so for the next, what was it? Maybe 25 years. I basically worked for this company, though it went through changes. At one point, John himself stepped back from the company and sold it to us, the employees. The company grew from the 10 to hundreds of people. It did well. And it was basically software consulting primarily to the avionics industry, but we also did work for John Deere tractors and embedded systems, so lots of embedded code and so forth. And so that's where I was for quite a long time.
You're still making games, aren't you? You're still making adventure games. Kinda,
sorta. In 2000, I put out a game called Return to Pirates Island 2. Which was a game I really had already done for Texas Instruments as a single-shot propriety for them. Remember I said I had done some special things for them? Well, I wrote a game specifically for them under a special license. It was, as far as I know, the world's first, and maybe only, graphic adventure game on a cartridge that would run on the TI-99. And that was a lot of fun writing. It used the older 2-word engine. And so I wanted to take my old engine, get it running on the IBM world. The PC was starting to grow. I still had fond memories of doing this. So converted my engine to work on the IBM PC. And I took my old database of the old 2-word section and created a full sentence parsed version of the game, added a bunch more puzzles, and put that out. Just sold it privately to people who were interested online. So I had fun with that. That was around 2000. Then around 2013, I did another game called The Inheritance, which is a Christian Bible-based game that I also had a lot of fun doing. In 2018, I went to a convention. At this point, I was 60-ish, 62. And I went to a convention that had asked me to come a number of times. I had turned down. My wife and daughter heard about it and said, no, you're going to this. So I went to this one. It was called CGDC, which there's cgdc.org. You want to look them up, or .net. I don't remember which it is. And they were, it stands for Christian Game Developers Conference. So it's a very similar to GDC, but on a smaller basis, designed for people who are wanting to use their games for more than just financial gain, as it were. Made some very good contacts. Met a fellow who had the license to the Redwall series of books, which is a very popular young adult book in the 80s and 90s. I was actually taught in some schools. It's quite the series by Brian Jakes, and they had the license to do some games for it from Random House. And they want to know if I'd be interested in doing a sub-license and doing an adventure game for one of those games.
Right.
So that is when I started a new company called Clopus that literally God named himself. It was amazing how that happened. It was, we were meeting, he, myself, another friend there, and my wife, and we're trying to come up with a name for the company. And we were playing with all sorts of different ideas, acronyms. We figured out that what we wanted was a name that was easy to pronounce, easy to read, you knew what it said, may or may not stand for something, It had to be available on the web. In other words, nobody else was using that name for commercializing, and didn't accidentally go to a porn site or something. So this was our guidelines. And we're playing around, and my wife said, well, when you want answers, what do you usually do? And I said, well, I will pray and I'll read the Bible. So as they're continuing the discussion, they're throwing stuff around. I took out my phone, which had the Olive Bible app on it, and I opened it to the Bible that I was currently reading, and just with my thumb, I was just flicking without looking, just left, right, and just listening. And then suddenly I just stopped and felt impressed to read, and I start reading. And what I read was, and Jesus was on the cross, and at the foot of the cross was Mary, and Mary of Clopas, and wait, Mary of what? Clopas? In this translation, the word was Clopas. I said, I've never heard that word before. Kind of interesting. Let's see, does it fit our guidelines? It's 5 or 6 letters. We wanted something short. It's easy to pronounce. Doesn't seem to have any bad connotations or anything about it. Just looking at the name, looking on the web, nobody's using it. I can't find a company by that name. And then I decided do some more. What does the word mean? Is it a place? Is it a person? And there's a lot of controversy on this. People really don't know. Bible scholars don't know. They don't know if it was a place or a person. Most likely, she was married to Clopas, but it's kind of odd to say Mary of Clopas. The others didn't say who they were married to, so they don't know. Anyway, I just continued doing a quick web search, and I came across a website that said the mystical meaning of words. Oh, okay. And Clopas was in there. So, okay, what is their take on the mystical meaning of words? And I read it and I said, okay, God has picked this word, because the mystical meaning of words in this website was glory to the Father.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
So Clopas was born.
Cool.
And we went on to do a Redwall game called Escape the Gloomer. It took us a year. It was on it was on Steam, on mobile platforms, on Alexa. Worked with Amazon on that. They were all fired up too about it and worked with us, signed engineers. So I'm very proud of the effort of the game. I think it's a great game, and it's very faithful to the books. Like I did with Marvel, I immersed myself in the Redwall world. And what I did was I took the second book in the series and wrote a parallel story to what was going on there, to explain some things that Brian Jakes didn't explain. He had one character in there, Escape the Gloomer, for about one chapter. And so I expanded it into a full story that explained a lot of things. And the game, you played through the story. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the game did not sell well. And so that was really the end of our major effort at Clopas. We were pretty much getting ready to have to shut down at that point. Though God had other ideas, and he's kept Clopas alive since then, amazingly so. I did another adventure game, also has not really sold that well or done that well. It's called Adventureland XL. It's currently just on early access for PC on Steam. What I did was I took my original game, Adventureland, and rewrote it in a full sentence parser, and added a bunch of small changes to the base game to fix some things, and then added a whole new section at the end after you finish the base game. So that's all in there. Everything is complete. The game is fully playable. The game also basically phones home. As you play it, it will email the play so that I get the people's playthroughs to be able to analyze what's going wrong, what's working, what's not, and bugs and so forth. It also, though, is not really selling that well, so it's sadly not a financial success. Clopus is still ongoing, though, and there's some very interesting things going on in its future. Right now, my wife and I are literally in the process of transitioning the company to one of our employees who's going to take it over, who has some great visions of what they want to do with the company and where they're going with it. And so I think you'll be hearing about Clopus further in the future.
Oh, cool.
So that's pretty much brings us up to date on what I've been doing with adventure games.